Play video. Please come light. The video you just saw was one of the last few moments of Darrell Caldwell's life, also known as Drakeo the Ruler. His life was taken way too soon, and it should have never happened. As you saw in this video, Mr. Caldwell was essentially lynched by over 40 to 60 people. And as you also saw in that video, Mr. Caldwell had no security. That video ran for a full minute, and you didn't see one security officer there. What you also see, you saw a large fence open up where people were streaming in and out, in and out. The concert, once upon a time in Los Angeles, had over 50 of the most iconic music artists in the industry. But what we also know is that it was in South Central Los Angeles, and they had invited a whole host of hip hop's greatest rappers. You had Snoop Dogg, you had GU, you had YG, you had so many people from so many different eras. And you also knew that there's a possibility that there could be an element of danger. You had Bloods, you had Crips, and affiliations amongst them. And we all know that those groups don't go together. So what happened this evening? On the evening of December 18, 2021, Live Nation, C3 Presents, Bobby Dee Presents, and a whole host of others failed Mr. Caldwell and his family. Here today, we have Tiana Pertu, and we have his son, young Caden Caldwell. And he will never, ever see his father again. And yes, the people who murdered Mr. Caldwell will be held accountable, and we're going to allow the district attorney to do that. But what I will say is this. This should have never happened if those promoters had actually had the proper security protocol. Yes. And that's what happened. This was a preventable death. And this young man of 5, who we hope to live, who will live to be 100, will never see his father again. And he loved his father, and his father loved him very much. Now, some of my colleagues today are going to be speaking. We're also going to hear from Ms. Pertu, and we're going to hear from Kate himself about how this has impacted his life. But what I will tell you is this. Those who failed all of those artists, and more specifically, those who failed Darrell Caldwell, Drakeo the Ruler, they're going to be held accountable because the world lost an amazing artist, a beautiful human being, a father, a son, a brother, and a friend for so many, and a caretaker for so many. I'm now going to have my colleague, Rodney Diggs, speak for a moment. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. The video that we just saw is the prime example, and this is a case of pure negligence. Negligence at its finest. We only saw a minute in this video, but we know that the melee, the altercation, the 50 to 60 people on one individual lasted longer than that. And why? How did that happen? If you can show The next slide. Yeah, the line.
Okay, sure.
You see here a lineup of icons, up and coming entertainers such as Drakeo the Ruler. These people didn't have protection, and we are fortunate and saddened at the same time that it didn't spread to all the people there that was at the event. What doesn't make sense is where this incident took place was backstage, where the artists need to feel protected. And they weren't protected due to the negligence of Live Nation and others who will be held accountable. And as a result of this negligence, Caden, 5-year-old, is not gonna be able to spend holidays, other New Year's and things of that nature with his father. What's also more glaring is that Drakeo was not allowed to bring in his own security. So if you can't have your own security there, then you best believe that security needs to be provided, not just to Drakeo, but to these other artists to prevent things like this happening. Understand that, yes, everyone has been locked up for about 1.5 to 2 years because of COVID, and now people are out and want to have fun. But you can't just throw events because you know that people have an urgency to want to come out and enjoy. You still need to provide protocols, not just COVID protocols, but safety protocols to protect individuals' safety. That goes from the health, and that goes to their well-being, and that goes to saving lives of others. And again, because of this negligence, we are now here today, but best believe that we are going to get justice for the family on behalf of Drakeo the Ruler. Thank you.
We're now going to hear from Kellen Davis, and Mr. Davis represents Drakeo's family. So Darrell, Cornell, Drakeo's brother, and others. So let's hear from Mr. Davis.
Thank you, James, and good morning to everyone. I had the privilege of knowing Drakeo, Darrell Caldwell, Drakeo the Ruler, for an extended period, and probably during one of the darkest times in his life. And the courage, the leadership, the strength that I knew in Drakeo was unmatched. He faced life in prison. He maintained his integrity, and he came out, didn't bear the scars, didn't let the scars from that event stop him from being the incredible artist that we knew, that provided the culture with new, unique, and just amazing art that we all get to benefit from, and that's going to even outlast this tragedy. Now, I think that what he was able to accomplish in just over a year after facing the full wrath of the government's efforts to persecute him, it speaks to the man that he was. I know from my experiences with him in the way he spoke about his son, Kate. I know the way that he took care of his family. And what we lost was a friend, a leader, and the entire culture, the city of Los Angeles, and the entire culture that suffered a loss with this, but none more than his family. Now, as my colleagues mentioned, I represent Drakeo's mother, as well as his brother, and several other of his friends who were present at the event that led to his death. And they also suffered because of the negligence of the parties that we discussed earlier. There was absolutely no reason for this to have happened. And let's be clear, this was not just an accident or something that happened. This was extreme negligence, and this was a targeted assassination. He was killed by these people, and he was the focus of it. Everybody else did suffer, but Drakeo was the person who was attacked and stabbed in the neck as he was about to enter the stage, just moments before he was going to enter the stage to do what he does for a living. It's inexcusable. It is despicable. And we are going to seek justice. We are going to get justice for Drakeo and his family. Thank you.
And before Ms. Perdue takes the mic, I want to say something very important. This is not like Live Nation hasn't had issues before. Live Nation continuously fails safety for its patrons who were coming to the concerts. We just saw with Astro World, but it didn't start with Astro World. It has happened time and time again. And now we have yet another incident where Live Nation has put money ahead of the safety of its artists and the people who are coming there to enjoy these different venues and the people performing. So I just want people to understand this is not the first time, but I will be damn sure it will be the last. So now we're going to have Ms. Pertut come here and speak a little bit about what they're going through with her experience.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm Tiana. I am the mother of Draco's son, Hayden, right here. It's been hard. It's been a real tragedy for us, especially for me being that my son is only 5, and I have to continue every day to just see, like what can I do? How could I explain to him that his dad is not coming back? Now, when it happened, I did let him know, that his dad is not coming back, but then just a day after, it's like, okay, is my dad still gone? And I'm like, yeah, he's gone. Like, we're not gonna be able to see him again. And it just sucks for Caden because he's only 5 and his dad's life was taken away from him. He's not gonna be able to grow up with his dad anymore. He was ripped away from all opportunities that he had with his dad. Growing, I know that he's already been gone away from him the majority of his life because of being incarcerated. And thank God he was able to beat that case and come out and still have the love for his son that he remained while he was incarcerated. I just thought it would start from there. It would be a way better future for Caden. It would be something different now that his dad is there with him. But now that this happened, it's like, wow, now it's no more, okay, you can hear your dad over the phone. You can go see him on the weekends. It's nothing. The only thing we have left is memories for him. And just the fact that I have to continue to think about how many times I'm gonna have to repeat that until he actually understands is what's the hardest for me. My son is only 5. He has so many years of his life left to grow up. And when it's gonna even have to start over when it's really time for him to understand, okay, my dad is really going. I'm at the stage where I know that I'm not gonna see my dad anymore. And I just feel like the lack of security that was there that night, it just doesn't make sense on how did these people get through? How did these people get access backstage to an artist? He was a writing artist, but he was very big enough to where he can have his own security and he can be protected. And the fact that he wasn't, it just shows like, where was anyone? Where was anyone there to help him or to help his entourage? Where was the security? You want to say something, maybe? And literally, we spend days listening to his music. Every time YouTube comes on, he wants to listen to his dad because that's the memory that he has left. His dad being on stage, his dad performing. And it sucks that he's never going to be able to be on that journey with him again. Thank you.
Thank you. Something that's also important that I want everyone to know is Mr. Caldwell didn't die immediately. He suffered for hours and hours. And this good brother, Mr. Davis, was at the hospital for those hours by his side. And so Mr. Caldwell's memory is not going to be left in vain. With that, I will open things up for questions.
Yeah, so we're gonna do questions, and I know I have people on Zoom, so. Yeah, I do. So raise your hand on Zoom and I'll get to you. And then who has questions here? Go ahead, Ted.
Can you describe the context of the video? Because I was reading that there was like a decoy attack and then a main attack. So can you describe what we're seeing in the context of the attack?
Sure, the video, the part of the video that we wanted to highlight. It wasn't as to what happened initially. This particular point in the video is towards the end where we likely believe the actual murder happened, or at least the injuries occurred to Draco at that point. So it's sort of towards the end of the overall fight itself. But if you'll notice, people are coming through that fence originally, and that fence is the outside. That's the public right there. People are coming in. They're able to corner Draco, and again, it's approximately 40 to 60 people were able to get into this area who were adverse to Mr. Caldwell, and then they close the gate back up to then corral him back in. And so that's sort of the end of ultimately the fight. But it's for that minute period, that's what happens. Now, as far as the corralling, what we do know is this: when Draco appeared with his group at the initial security checkpoint, they prevented over half of his group from entering into the security. They said there's a COVID protocol, so we can't let the vast majority of your entourage here. They only let approximately 6 to 8 people, including Draco, into that staging area where you're going to go to the backstage. And when he shows up, again, maybe Mr. Davis can talk a little bit about that, but we do know that when he shows up, approximately 40 to 60 people, many of them dressed in red, then begin the attack. And so that is to the extent that's what I know. And I wanted to show that video so that people understood the security problems here. How does that happen?
So this is after he's been attacked, and how far is he away, like at this point,
Yeah.
timeline wise?
So maybe I could shed a little light on that. So when you mentioned a decoy, the way that what we know about how the incident happened is that there was an initial fight involving less than the hordes that we see in this video. And as that seemed to have started to simmer down, that's when we see this surge, this absolute surge of so many people that just overwhelmed Draco and the rest of his friends. And that's when we believe that knives came into play.
And this video was taken after that happens?
This is the moment that we believe, this is right around the moment that we believe that Draco was stabbed.
That surge, okay.
Correct.
And he's how far away from that video?
You can see him in that video.
You can,
You can
okay.
actually see him in the video. He's wearing black with the kind of the white letters there. You'll see him toward the bottom right of the screen where he's still fighting, and eventually he starts trying to block the stabs, what we believe are the lunges to stab.
It's actually happening. in the
Yes,
video.
it's happening in this video. And
Can you turn the lights down? Thank you. Let me take one step back there.
so this is where we see people trying to escape this attack. And they are, as James said, they were essentially corralled back into this area where they could not escape what was happening. And so if we look toward the bottom, kind of along closer to the fence, you can see, actually see Draco. So we see some of the melee going on.
This may be some.
Yeah, this is gonna be a better angle. You'll see Draco toward the top of the screen. That's his group. Draco's on the far top of the group.
Can you point to him?
So you'll see him right here, right there with the black jacket with the white letters. So we're gonna just
Okay.
back up a millisecond. Yeah.
So, but just barely.
And you can, once you see the, there, here we go, right here.
Yeah.
With the white.
Stripes?
Yeah, right there, right here.
Okay, got it.
Exactly.
That's it.
Thank you.
And just really quick, the big takeaway from
Lights,
this,
please.
Can you turn the lights
Lights,
back
please.
on?
the big takeaway from this is the lack of security. So again, for at minimum a minute, you see no signs of security at all. And there's this fence that allows people from the outside to come to where the artists are to go to their stage, the backstage. There should be security there. There is no one there. And so that's the big point of liability as well. That's the negligence to provide security for these artists and also for the safety of.
I'm sorry, just one follow-up. Can you describe the nature of the lawsuit then? What are you suing and for what amount? And
Well, we are suing for negligence and wrongful death, survival action as well. The amount we don't have at the moment.
It will be no less than 20 million.
Live Nation.
Bobby D Productions, C3 Presents, and there will be others.
Okay.
So these are all the promoters and Live Nation that you're filing suit.
That is correct.
Okay. Just for clarification, so what you were depicting is you have a fence perimeter that separates the concert goers from the artist's entrance backstage area, correct? Okay, and so you're claiming that there was no security personnel manning those access points of that security fence
Anywhere.
anywhere?
There was no security.
I'm
present.
sorry, to the microphone.
There was no security present for any portion of the attack that happened, either the initial fight or the surge that ultimately resulted in his death. And this, as my colleague said, this minute clip here, it kind of highlights the main kind of the climax of what happened. But this went on for an extended period, and there were no security present. We're not saying this, hyperbolically. I mean, literally, there was not any person from security personnel or law enforcement present. This venue, these huge artists like Drakeo, they bring the fans. The fans bring the money. And these people had one job. These promoters and the people that held the venue, they had one job, and that's to keep these people safe. And it's a wholesale failure to do that.
Question, if you would, did not only Drakeo, but did any of the other artists or their management personnel express concerns about security there at the site, or was it brushed off on Live Nation? Good question.
That is a good question. I can't speak to that right now. Maybe James can.
What I can tell you is this, it's standard protocol to have a full-on security plan. And so you didn't necessarily have to raise a concern that I might have a security issue. There was enough in the media to know that after Drakeo had beat his case, there were certain elements that were targeted. That is clear. So there was absolutely, as far as we can tell, no safety protocol that was set up to ensure that people were safe. The reason why we say this is that you saw an entire video for 1 minute, and during that entire minute, you never see a yellow jacket, you never see a law enforcement officer, you see no one. And it isn't until, and there are some disturbing videos out there where Drakeo is laying on the ground, finally being helped by EMT. It's not until then, and I'm assuming that was several minutes after the incident occurred, that law enforcement and EMT showed up to try to save his life.
There was no or anything else from Live Nation, because if we've got the security handled, it's not a problem. And did any of these artists, including Drakeo, say, wait a second, this isn't enough, we may have a problem?
At this point, we're unsure as to what those discussions were. But I think that based upon your typical standard procedure when you're having a concert, most artists feel fairly safe because they believe and they trust that the promoters have set up a proper safety protocol.
Meaning that they don't necessarily have to bring their own
Absolutely.
security.
Correct.
So, does anyone on
There's
Zoom have
another-
a question? We can't ignore our Zoom participants. So does anyone on Zoom have a question? Because if not, we'll keep going. It doesn't look like it. Okay, we'll keep going.
So, right, is this going to trial, or are the offices open to start talks and negotiating? And what do you want to see done for future festivals like this, where you've got A-listers and thousands of people are going to come?
It's too early to tell whether or not this will go to trial or discussions will make sense. I can tell you, people will be filing the lawsuit at the top of next week. Here's what I want to have happen. And we've seen this time and time again. I want people to take security measures serious. That's what I want people to do. There are plenty of promoters out there who flawlessly, and I've represented a lot of entertainment artists over the years, who have flawlessly executed security plans to ensure that these artists are safe. I need Live Nation and all those involved in this particular production to do better.
Yes.
And to come up with security protocols that keep not only the artists safe, but also the people who come there to celebrate safe.
Is there any information that could indicate that, that he was in danger of, at that concert.
So, I mean, Mr. Davis, do you want to talk a little bit about the potential threats to his life?
Sure. So what I think was clear from the evidence that we have so far is that Drakeo and his group were treated differently than other artists who were able to have these huge entourages come in. We know that following the context of the criminal case that I was a part of, we know that there was fallout from that case. We know that it spread kind of through the music industry. We know that it spread throughout South Central Los Angeles. And it's important to note that this concert happened at Exposition Park, which is essentially in the heart of South Central Los Angeles, adjacent to where it's no secret, whether from law enforcement or anyone else, the violence that can take place in that area, just in the neighborhoods just outside of where the event happened. And so I think that the threat to Drakeo and coming to an event where he's really coming to make a living, right? It is where I think that it's inherent in with the nature of the other artists that were invited, the location of the venue, and the promoter's knowledge of Drakeo's history with the criminal justice system, where he was ultimately exonerated. But as we know, unfortunately, even where a person is proven innocent, he's exonerated, there is fallout from that. And that was known to all the promoters at the time this happened.
We'll take two more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
Some of the other artists, the headliners, did they have their own personal security
We're
at the venue?
we're not sure.
Oh, you're not
At this
sure?
point, we don't have those answers.
Okay.
Still, does anyone on Zoom have questions before we wrap? I see no hands raised, so.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all very
Good,
much.
Thank you.
Oh, no. Now I realize what's going on.
Hey, if you want the video that we showed, send me an email. I'll send it to you. Thank you.
Same email?
I have your email too.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.